Hello everybody and welcome to our channel. I'm Viviana
And I'm Alex.
and we have been married for 27 years, and a lot of people have been curious about our relationship because my husband was 14 years old and I was 15 years old when we got married. So we are going to share our experiences, our relationships, and our thoughts about just how this has all happened and how we've been managing our marriage and our relationship.
And we'll talk a little bit about the early days on how we did everything and as we went along, and then a little bit about our life of how we're managing now as two professionals and having older kids and having grandkids. So a lot of changes. So join us for the ride. It's going to be a great one.
Your eyes, a galaxy of stars, capture me, hold me in your arms. Your smile, a ray of sunshine bright, makes my world feel warm and right. You're my everything, my guiding light. You fill my days and make my nights. I'm lost in you, my love so true. Forever yours, me and you. We dance through life, hand in hand. A love so pure across the land. With every beat, my heart does sleep. You're all I need, you're all I keep. You're my everything, my guiding light. You fill my days and make my nights.
Okay, hello everybody and welcome back to our channel. So we are doing the part 2 of where we left off. First of all, we do need to change our introduction because just 2 days ago, we are no longer been married for 27 years. We celebrated our 28th anniversary.
28
So-
years. 28 years of being married.
Yes, so we talk about this all the time, but just the day that we went for dinner, we were talking about how we can't believe it's been 28 years. But today we are going to do our part 2. We left off on when we told our parents that we were pregnant, and then we said we were going to do the next, which was the actual picking up and moving in, right? So this is April 2nd, 1997.
April 2nd, 1997, it was dark outside. It was a little cloudy. I felt something in the air. Something wasn't right. I drove up in my mom's maroon Aerostar van to pick up Viviana and all her junk.
Yeah.
And as I drove up to the house, I couldn't see inside. I couldn't see what was going on. But there was a big commotion going on. Me and my cousin Pelagio, I took my cousin Pelagio with me so he can help me load everything up. And then Viviana comes running out of the house, frantically. No, I'm just kidding. Just came out of the house.
He did say there was violence before
Well, I'm getting
we
there.
finished
And
our
then,
video last time.
and then Viviana's coming to the van and she gets in and she says, "Let's go." I didn't know that behind the closed doors, my father-in-law was trying to hold my mother-in-law back because she had a gun and she was gonna shoot me.
BB gun. She did. It was a
She had
BB gun.
she had a BB gun and she was gonna shoot me with it, and I always joke about it, but I don't know if she actually shot the van or not. But
She didn't.
it was one of those radial. What do you call those?
I don't know.
This is the pump action, the one pump BB guns. But she was pretty upset. So Viviana gets in the car. I didn't even meet Pelagio. She had one bag with her, and we took off. We went to my house. We lived in neighboring little towns. She lived in a little town called Rio Bravo. I lived in a little town called El Cenizo. I'm sure at this point she had already said her goodbyes with her mom and her dad and everything, but they didn't want to talk to me at this point yet. I wasn't their favorite yet.
Person,
I
yes.
wasn't their favorite yerno at this point yet.
So just a little bit of, just backstory. We were just talking about this.
Mhm.
So as you get older and as you become a parent yourself and as you go through these things in life yourself, you go back and understand the behaviors and the reaction that my parents had. Again, culture is a big thing, and it's very important on everybody's relationship. And so I was just telling Alex how it went on, me, my experience.
So I'll ask you that. When you, I know that when you were in your house, you were saying goodbye to your parents. How were you feeling when that was happening before you came out of the door?
So
What did you guys talk about?
like you said, the reason why I left, just like let's go, and I had a bag, is just because my parents were not okay with it, and it's contradicting because
Put yourself in their shoes though. You have a 15-year-old daughter.
Mhm.
That's your oldest daughter, your pride and joy, and you have to let her go.
right.
Nobody's okay with that.
No.
When my kids were 15, I used to think of that and how I thought my father-in-law felt when my daughters were 15.
Right.
I remember doing this when my daughters were 15. I brought them in a little bit closer, thinking these girls are not. I was very vigilant. These girls are not going anywhere at the age of 15.
Right.
And now me has almost going to be 28 years old. It's like, go ahead, Mija, it's time to go.
Right. Okay, so the day I left my home, I had mixed emotions, right? Because I was the pride and joy of my parents. And so my parents were very disappointed. I mean, they wanted to because of our culture, they wanted us to get married, and they thought that was the right thing to do, but also they were losing their daughter, right? That's what they were thinking. And so in my home before I left, it was just, we were crying, and like I previously said on the other video, was that my dad, said that he didn't cry for his parents when they passed, or his dad, because, it was different. And yet with me getting married or telling him I was pregnant was really hard on him, that it was something that, it made him so emotional and so devastated that he cried when I told him that I was pregnant. My mother, same. She was very emotional about the situation. And so again, when Alex said there was violence, what he meant by that, it is because I had to run out of my home at that time after, I hugged.
Not run, but hurry.
Or
Right?
hurry, yeah. It was because he was having mixed emotions. My mother was upset that she was, in her mind, losing her daughter, and that Alex was taking her best part of her life and her pride and joy. And so when we cried, and it was very emotional, but also my mother had a BB gun. And
She had
so,
a gun.
A BB gun. And so my dad was trying to hold her and ask that I go before she would do something silly. And so what I did was I got my bag and I ran outside. I hurried outside and got on the van. Alex got there in a van, and while my dad was holding her so that she wouldn't, go after Alex with the BB gun. And Alex had I think it was your cousin.
Yeah, it was me and my cousin Pelagio, and we were waiting for you in the van, and then you came on board. You came onto the van, and then we took off.
And that was your grandpa's van?
Yeah, it was. My tia Connie gave this van because my grandfather loved vans, right? So she gave this red Aerostar van to my grandfather, and he passed away. They gave it to my mom. So I went to go pick her up in my grandpa's van. We got on there and we took off. We lived in these our two neighboring neighborhoods, or two little neighborhoods. One's Rio Bravo, the other one is El Cenizo. So I lived in El Cenizo, she lived in Rio Bravo, and we went to go pick you up to go to my place.
Right.
The other thing I think we talked about as well was how, making that decision for your parents was, we lived in a small little town. So Viviana not only was her parents' pride and joy, but everybody knew her in her town, right? So her dad would go to the meat markets, like, hey, Locadio, how are you? How are you doing? How's Viviana? What's she been up to? Anything new with her, right? So she was very involved with her community and everything. So that played a big part as to
the way they were feeling and their emotion, because I was so involved in my community. I would give my dancing classes for free in my backyard. I was involved in church. I did Bible studies classes. I volunteered. I did so much that our little town knew who I was. People genuinely, had a relationship with me and my mom.
And this was important because we were from the wrong side of the tracks, right? So a lot of violence, a lot of crime in our neighborhoods. And Viviana started this program for dance. It was called Viviana Star Creations. It was free to the community. It was a way to keep the kids off the street, do dancing, do fine arts, and stuff like that. So she was very, very involved with the community, and she was only 15 years old, right? So that was.
I think at 13 we started that with my mother, and parades, and the sheriff department would even help me close the street to make our little parades, and so again. It was not just just another teenage pregnancy. I feel that it was a big deal for everybody, because everybody had built some relationship with me in my community, and so my parents, especially my mom, was asked often about me and her feeling. And again, right now we live in a world where who cares? Back then, they care. They didn't know how they were gonna come out of their home and tell people that I was pregnant.
Yeah.
It was disappointing.
And I remember having a conversation, because when we had this conversation with your dad, it was only with your dad, right? Because your mom didn't want to be involved in any of this. She didn't want anything to do with me at the time. Now I'm her favorite, but at the time she didn't want anything to do with me. So I had this conversation with your dad, and this is a 14-year-old. Oh, I'm going to take care of your daughter, and don't worry about it. I'm going to raise that little girl, and we didn't know it was a girl at the time, but I'm going to raise our kid. And he was like, this means nothing to me. You're 14 years old. You're still in middle school, right? So there's this conversation that we're having has no merit, has no weight to it, right? No value. Come back to me when you've been married to my daughter for 10 years and you guys are still together, right?
Right.
And then I can wait when we turn 10 years married, and I go and throw it in his face, right?
And he does it every year.
And I do it every year, and now he's kind of like, all right, okay, I get it. You know, you guys have been married for 28 years now. Bring it up every year just to mess with him.
Right. So, yeah, it was a very difficult day and very emotional, and like I said, it's an emotional roller coaster, because I was so happy to go move in with him, so happy that we would get to live together, and that I was gonna be his wife, because I love him so much. But then again, I knew that my parents, and even though it sounds silly to me, it just felt like I had, tear a part of my heart, because I loved my parents so much, and all I wanted to do was be their pride and joy. I grew up wanting to be the best I could be to make my parents proud. Everything I did was to make them proud. So you can only imagine what was going on in my mind and my parents. It was hard, but he ended up picking me up.
Mm-hmm.
We get there.
So now we get to my house, and what are you feeling when we get to the house?
So when I get to his house, we're gonna live in his room, right? It's my
What do you
mother-in-law.
remember?
It's my in-laws' house, and I walk in there, and his room is maroon, right? And
Yeah.
he was saying that it was because his dad is a painter, my father-in-law, and you said that he.
Yeah,
Yes,
after every job, he would have a little bit of paint left from all the different jobs that he did. So he would mix them all together to create 1 gallon of paint, mix it all up, and whatever color came out, that was going to be the color of your room. So that's why we ended up with the maroon color. I don't think it was even maroon. It was kind of like a really dark,
Purple or
weird
something.
looking kind of red.
Red.
Yeah.
So, and I remember his bed, and then like a dresser, like peinador, and then he had pictures there. And
So
then,
Viviana.
yeah, and then he had like, I told him it was a closet, but he said that it like, como un palo, to hang the clothes.
Yeah, I just put up so that room used to be the kitchen, and then my dad moved the kitchen to the front of the house and turned that into a bedroom. So that's why I didn't have a closet, but I put a pole and I drilled it into the corner of the room, and that's where we would hang all our clothes. So it's that little closet there, the dresser, the bed, and then the bed, we have some pictures of me with Vivianita when she was a baby,
Right.
holding her. That was that bed that we first moved into. So it was pretty neat, right? Because now we didn't have to hide anymore.
Right,
It
and
was
I
exciting.
remember looking at Alex, and it's like, is this really happening? Like, we were super excited, and I was like, oh my God, like, we're not hiding. I'm gonna be your wife, and we're actually here together, and I'm gonna live with you. And so it was like a honeymoon the
Yeah.
first days, right?
First week or so.
It was like a honeymoon, but then reality, right? And that's when you have two different cultures coming together, trying to get along, and then obviously not having our own space, living in my in-laws' home, and then everybody has their own house rules. So trying to go through that was a challenge. And I know, so nothing was perfect like any other relationship or marriage. So it was difficult because I had to learn their ways, and there was a lot of fighting.
I think at first it was, first of all, it's two teenagers, right? Moving in together and thinking like teenagers, right? Like you just think of the immediate, oh, this is awesome.
Yeah.
But not thinking of, we're both teenagers, hormonal. Now you're pregnant, add more hormones to that. Then, you guys have kids that are 12 to 15 years old, and their girls are impossible to live with it at that age. So add a baby and all this responsibility to that. And then the realization of, oh man, I need to get a job, right? I need to start working to make some money. So I used to work for my dad. Nobody would give me a job because I was 14 years old. So my dad got his boss to let me work for them and make $100 a week. We make fun of, we laugh at that sometimes, kind of like Napoleon Dynamite, right? It's like, it's like less than $1 an hour.
But yeah, so once we moved in, it was a challenge because, like I said, everybody has their own way of doing things. And so
Right.
I have my parents, for example, they're different. In my my in-laws is different. I had to wake up at 5 in the morning when he started to work and do his lunch. And I said un lonche because it was time for him to go with his dad to paint, and that was his job at that time. And so me having to wake up and do lunch for him is something that I've obviously have never done before.
Right.
And yes, in our culture, they teach you without knowing already to prepare you to be an adult. And, you know, they tell you all these things where you need to be, you know, clean and you need to wash the dishes because otherwise you're not going to get married. Or if you get married, you're not going to be a good wife. So, you know, we don't do that anymore. But in our culture back then, that's how we were brought up. I was brought up to, you know, be an adult as a little girl.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that unintentionally, right, as parents back then, they would teach their daughters, you need to learn how to cook, you need to grow up, you need to be prepared to know how to clean and all this. And with that, us as kids, we think, oh, we need to act more like grown-ups, right? So our parents or your parents not thinking about that as a parent of a girl is you're really pushing your daughter to, hey, you know, prepare yourself for getting married and having kids and all that. And us as hormonal kids, I guess, would be kind of like, well, what if I have a boyfriend now and we're gonna do adult things, right? So unintentionally, your parents are kind of pushing you in that direction, and then you end up pregnant, and it's like, whoa, what are you thinking? It's like, no, I meant like learn how to clean and cook, not the rest of it, but unintentionally that happens.
Right.
But then us now living together, so your mom didn't cook for your dad for breakfast. Your dad was a cook, so
Right.
that wasn't something that was expected. And at our house, my mom had my older brother, my older sister really close to each other, like Mexican twins, right? So they're the same age, a couple of months at some time of the year. So my mom never worked when they were younger because she had to take care of my brother and my sister. So yeah, she would wake up in the morning and cook breakfast for my dad, make lunch, get everything ready for work. Completely different cultures from completely different things. So now you go home and you tell your mom, oh, it's because I have to wake up at 5 in the morning to cook lunch for Alex. Pendejo, that's not something you shouldn't do. Let him cook for himself. Who do they think?
Right.
And then you come home and you bring that to
Your home.
to my home where that's the norm. And it's like, my mom's like, well, they're crazy because this is the way it works. This is the way you're supposed to, right? So living in somebody else's house, not having our own set of rules, not creating our own thing, creates problems, right? So
with me, I had actually, my parents are different. Like my dad, like you heard, my mom would say, you know, that's not something you need to do. Why can't he cook for himself? Why can't he do this for himself? You have, you know, that's okay. And then I have my dad saying,
okay.
say, and then you have my dad saying like, no, mijita, you know, that's what you should be doing. You're the wife now, and they have their ways of doing things, and that's how you support him, for him to go get, you know, the job that he has to go to. And so then of course you have his parents and the way they do things and their lifestyle, which is different, and trying to find the you know, the just getting along with everybody is difficult at the beginning. Like I said, it's the honeymoon, the few weeks, but then the reality starts and you're still living in somebody else's home, their culture, their rules, their ways. And then I come in here with mine, and then I have them telling me one thing, my parents telling me something else, and I'm getting into fights with Alex. So that's where our relationship starts having problems, because then I come to you and you're like, Viviana, mi mama, you know, is telling you this. It's like, then me, I'm the rebel over here trying to do what my mom told me. No, don't let that happen. And so that's when we start having problems, right?
I think also a lot of the problems that you have initially, well, not everybody, because nobody gets married at the age of 15 and moves in with their parents, but us, most of the problems that we had were us taking sides, right? I was taking sides with my mom, you were taking sides with your mom, because she's your mom and she's my mom. And it was arguments that we were having that we didn't even really care about those things,
Right.
but we were having these arguments because of what my mom was saying, or because of what your mom was saying, or my dad or your dad or whatever.
Yeah.
So, of course, we didn't have any money. I was working, making $100 a week, and so we started.
And then I kind of got I would go home and talk to my parents, and my dad, until this day, and I've said it before, my dad has always said, Viviana, the way that your relationship is going to work and your marriage is going to be successful is if you get along with your mother-in-law, because just like you are just as important to me, and we feel like they took you from me, the most important person. They probably feel the same. This is her son, and so
I'm a mom's favorite, by the way.
And I'm gonna say the same. And so, my dad would give me advice and say, Viviana, you need to get along with your mother-in-law. Whatever makes her happy is what you need to do, so that if you get along with her, your marriage is gonna be successful. And I took that by heart. And I went back, and every time, he said, Mija, limpia, ayuda, like clean up and help out, even if she's not asking you to do that. Like if she has some dishes there, you pick them up, you wash them. Do things that are gonna make her happy, because if she's happy, your husband is happy. And so that's gonna create a happy relationship. And so I started doing that. I started kind of changing those things. And I told Alex, I can't remember when the switch happened, but that made everything better. I just, started, and I don't want to say to please my mother-in-law and my father-in-law, but I started to kind of do things that were going to make her happy so that we can get along.
And I think that's another thing too, right? Like, I always teach the kids, hey, it doesn't matter who the person is, how smart, how dumb, how much you like them, how much you hate them. Anytime you have a conversation with a person, you sit down and you listen to what they have to say.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes from the person that you least expect it, you can learn such a valuable lesson, right? So you have to be a really good listener to do that.
Right.
And at first, when we first got married, that went out the window, right? Like, we didn't even care who was right or who was wrong. My mom was always right.
Yeah.
Your mom was always right, and that was a problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we wouldn't sit down and say, well, my mom might not be right about this, right? Because that meant I was giving in to what you were saying, and you were doing the same thing. Like, my mom was never wrong about anything, even though she was wrong about most of the stuff.
But we were mature enough to have these conversations and let's talk about it. We wouldn't sit down and have conversations about our arguments. It was just,
my mom is
who
better
won
than your
the
mom.
argument?
Yeah.
Well, my mom. Well, and it's like, again, it's silly, but he was 14 and I was 15 years old.
And sometimes you pick your battles, right? That's one of the most important lessons that you learn. You don't have to win them all. Sometimes you lose one intentionally to keep peace in the house, right? So it's.
But that wasn't our thoughts back then
Yeah.
when we were young and when we had just moved in.
How many points do I have? How many points do you have,
Keeping
right?
score. Yeah. So it was
Yeah.
very, very difficult at the beginning. Like I said, the first few weeks, it's honeymoon. We love each other. My father-in-law would always, my father-in-law would drive his van and we would sit on the back seat. We were always hugging
Making
and
out.
making out. And he's like, what did he say?
Ya déjala, huevón.
He would always say that, ya déjala, huevón. And so, it was all of that and it was great. And I was so in love. I am in love.
Yeah,
But at that time,
it was a puppy
then
love.
it was where reality, right? We start having our daily life and he starts work and I have to be doing these things as a wife. And so I needed to get these things done that I wasn't accustomed to. And it was hard to have our cultures, and our thoughts and our beliefs come together to have a good relationship. And so it was not all butterflies.
Mm.
We did have a lot of fights. And but Alex did with work his $100 a week.
Yeah.
He did start saving up for a little home that his uncle and
My godfather Chachis. He likes to build stuff just for fun. I don't know if it was just for fun or not, but he built this tiny home before tiny homes were a thing, right?
Yeah.
It was just a room, a roof, 4 walls, floor, and he had it sitting there. And I asked him, "Hey, could you sell that to me?" He's like, "Yeah, give me $1,000 for it." It's like, "I don't have $1,000, but I give you $100 a month, and then once I finish paying it, I'll take it." So he agreed to that just to help me out, of course, right? Because I'm sure he maybe lost money on that deal. But I finished paying it off. It was so small that the brother of my aunt, right, my aunt through marriage, he moved it by putting some cylinders under it, and they just pushed it little by little, pushed it all the way to my mom's backyard. And then slowly we started first putting in the electricity, then the plumbing, insulation.
And this happened slowly because
Yeah.
remember, Alex was only making $100.
$100 a week.
And so we were in school for like 2 months because I moved in April 2nd, which is why we celebrate our 28th anniversary. And then for 2 months, so May he comes, we finish school, and he continues to work.
Finished middle school.
Finished middle school. He's about to go to high school. I'm a high school freshman, and during the summer, I was gonna give birth to Gorda, to Vivianita, and so we're not moved out yet. We're still figuring things out in that room in my mother-in-law's house.
I think we lived at my mom's for like a whole nother year.
Yes, and
before we moved out.
Yes.
To the little house.
Yes, and so in that year where we're in my in-laws, Alex has siblings that, again, culture is different, and they feel that men should not, or they felt, I don't
Shouldn't do
know.
anything right.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, men are up here, women, you bring them food, you do the cleaning, women are women.
Right.
And so, kind of trying to get along and living in that environment when I have a mom that is very
Anti that.
yes.
Yeah.
Like, I do what I want to, and not because I'm a woman means I have to do the things that people think women do. And then you have, my husband.
See, but I think that was a little not very functional because, like, your mom wouldn't iron a shirt for your dad.
No.
Your mom wouldn't wash a dish for you. Your mom wouldn't bring him a plate of food. It was like completely
opposite.
the opposite.
And
everything that you should do for a man, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
I'm taking a stance, and I'm not going to do it.
And again,
Which,
that's where
that's wrong, right? I think that's wrong because your dad worked his whole life. Everything that he did was for you guys. He bought a house. He built a house for y'all. He had 2 quarter-acre lots. So everything that he did was for you guys.
right. But again,
From the male perspective, he did everything that he was supposed to do.
Mhm.
But from the female perspective, your mom wouldn't do anything because I'm putting my foot down and I'm not going to do it.
right.
Not for
And-
any reason,
and
not to
we
be
have
nice,
to-
not to be bad, not
No.
just, I'm not going to
In
do
my
it.
mom's eyes, her job was to be the best mother she could be.
Mhm, mhm.
She did everything she could with us as far as like volunteering in school, being with us at school, homework, activities,
Right.
anything that you can think of, she was there 110%.
Oh, yeah.
But
She's a great mom.
we always have to remember, and now as an adult, right, we talk about this. She also herself went through a
Went through
lot
some trauma.
and went through some trauma.
Right.
We know that now that people behave a certain way for a reason.
Right.
And so we've talked about this, and again, we know why things were,
Right.
but that would make it confused. There was confusion and also difficult in my part as a daughter
Mhm.
to try to figure out what was the right thing to do.
Well, because there's the way that your mom would act is because of her personal trauma, but that's not yours, right? So that's
Right.
So that's why I always tell people, like, you had a great dad.
Mm-hmm.
Your dad would never raise a finger on your mom.
Right.
And so from that aspect, that was zero the case in your house, right? But I always like to tell the story where there's this family, right, and passed down from generations. They have this recipe where they take this ham and they cut a third of it off, right? And then they cook it that way. So then the great grandma comes to visit for Thanksgiving and she sees this and she says, "Why are y'all cutting off a third of the ham and throwing it out?" Well, it's because that's the recipe. It's been passed down from generations from you. That's how you used to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, "Well, I did it that way because we had a tiny little oven and the ham wouldn't fit in there, so I had to cut off a third and cook it that way." Nobody ever asked why, so they just continued to do things the way that the grandma had. So they were just misinformed.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So that's what I keep saying, right? So like when you moved into our house, you came in with the anti-machismo ways, like I'm not going to do anything because that's the way that I was taught. Not thinking like, well, what's going to keep your husband happy? Or same thing with us, like what's going to keep your wife happy?
That's another thing.
'Cause I was-
Alex comes from that.
Yeah, because like what I come from is no iron, no household chores done by the man at all, because that's gay.
And
Or
that's not
right. That's not machista.
that's
The,
not
the
a
big
male.
word, the big word in our culture, in our family, is mandilon.
Right,
And
right.
you're mandilon if you do anything around the house.
Mhm.
But I always saw that, hey, Viviana's tired. She's been taking care of the baby all day. I'm gonna wash the dishes for her. And then she appreciated that.
Mhm.
And I saw, and me as a human being, you do something and you see something, make something that makes that person happy,
'Cause you love
and
them.
that gets positive reinforcement to
and
me.
vice versa.
Hey, let's do that, right?
Right.
Or Viviana, I would get home and she would make a sandwich for me. I love sandwiches; they're my favorite, right? So she sees that I like that. Hey, how are you today? You want me to make a sandwich, right? So these things that I couldn't do at my mom's house because we lived with her, and if God forbid my brothers or my dad caught me washing dishes or folding clothes or ironing clothes, that I wouldn't hear the end of it, right? But when we moved into our little house, when we finally finished it, we were so happy.
It was different, and it was
We were so happy because it was just this little room that we can go and lock the door and nobody bothered us. But I could do. My grandmother Lola taught me how to iron when I was a kid, and I'm the type of person that likes to make things look nice, right? Like remodel a home or repaint a piece of furniture, or iron, right? It gives me so much peace to iron. I love to iron. I love that you take a old wrinkled piece of clothing and you iron it and it looks brand new. You hang it up, it makes you feel good.
right.
So ironing was one of my favorite things to do that I couldn't do at my mom's house, but at my little house, I can iron, I can wash dishes, I can do things like that for you.
And I think part of it is because, like we said,
And it was a lot easier.
it's different because you're in a house where they have their own rules, they have their own ways and lifestyle, which is fine, but you're living there. So you have to comply with them in an appreciation, right? Because they're giving you everything.
And that's the thing too, right? We live at my mom's house. She's paying for our food, buying us clothing, taking. So yes, we're gonna live under her rules, right? That's kind of how it works.
Right.
Even if
But-
we're not her daughter or we're adults
It doesn't matter.
or doing adult things, right?
But as a marriage, or for us, again, because he was 14 and I was 15, it was hard to do this, to have a conversation and say, hey, you know, my mom or my dad is wrong, your mom and your dad is wrong because of
Yeah,
this.
that
Let's
would never
talk
happen.
about it.
That would never
That
happen.
was not going to happen.
Yeah.
Until, like I said, we had our own place, we had our own time, and then we started having these conversations and said, well, think about it, right? And that's when I think, like I said, there was like a switch where we started
We
talking
created
about things
our
and
own
we
rules
created
that
our
worked
own ways.
in our household.
And whatever worked for our relationship.
Yeah.
But it takes time.
Yeah.
And so when we moved
So
in,
even now, though-
it was chaos,
Yeah.
right?
So and even now though, right? Like we bring this up with my parents. Like in our household, everybody does their own laundry. Alejandro does his own laundry. Alejandra does her own laundry. Vivianita does her own laundry. We do our laundry. But everybody does that. So we bring that up to my mom. She's like, what? Alejandra is the girl. She should be doing Alejandro's and everybody's laundry. And Alejandra's like, what, Grandma? That's so sexist, right? And it's like, it's not even a thing, right, anymore. Like, in our household, nobody's misogynistic. Everybody
can do their own thing.
Does their own thing based on
they would help each
what
other
the
out
rules.
too,
Yeah.
and it's okay.
Alejandra takes out the recycle bin. Alejandra takes out the trash.
Yeah, right.
Right? Everybody has jobs because it's a fair, and that's how we bring our kids up, and it works in
And
our
again,
family.
we had to do this, and this goes in every relationship, that we all are brought up different.
Mhm.
Our culture is different, but there's going to be a time where you have to make your own changes, your own ways of whatever works for you, your family, and your relationship.
Yes, and especially when you get married, right? So that's kind of like one of the rules that we implement with our son that's married now and has a baby and lives by themselves is we're not. If you need help, if you need advice, you can come and talk to us about it. But we're not gonna be making more problems in your household by telling you she should be doing this, you should be doing that, this should be right. Like these were my rules in my house, those were her rules in her house. Now you create your own rules in your house, and when you run into problems, you can come and ask.
Right.
And then we can give you advice, and you can take it, or you can say, "Nah, I'm not gonna do that." Right? It's okay. It's your household. That's your house.
So going back to us,
And
so I moved in with Alex. We were, like I said, happy,
Yeah.
and then changes started happening, fighting started happening, and then we started slowly making changes and getting along.
Yeah.
So we were about a year, right, living in your mom's home before we moved to our little home back in the backyard. And
we were anxious to move to that little house too. It was during the winter time. My grandma had an extra bed that she was getting rid of, so we put that one in there. My father-in-law put a brand new kitchen in their house, so we took their old kitchen sink and it was covered in grease and dirt and all that. And I completely scraped it all off and made it brand new. We repainted it. So we put that as our kitchen. We bought a table in the flea market, a table with 4 chairs. No, not in the flea market. It belonged to my grandmother, Lola, and she sold it to us. We put that in our little house. So we had a dresser, our bed, the table, and the little sink that we took from your dad's house. And we moved into it, and then it was so cold we needed, like, we didn't have heat. So we just
AC or anything.
so we
It was
just covered ourselves
a square.
with Colcha San Marcos. If you're Mexican, you know what that means. and we would sit there and we would go like this. We
And
could see our
smoke
breath.
would come up.
You can see our breath. It was so cold.
Yeah.
But we were so happy to move into our own little space and have that for ourselves.
And that didn't happen until a year after.
Mhm.
So that's our
A
next
year or two maybe.
or maybe because we
Because
were
Vivianita was born in.
that the few months later.
She was
and
born
we
in
were
in my mom's house. We
Mhm,
lived
that's
inside
right, but
my
that was
mom's house. Yeah.
like a few months after I moved in. That was April, and in August she was born.
She was born in August.
So-
that's right.
Our next video is going to be about, we went to school on this, what we call pep bus.
On the pet bus.
And that was for our teenagers that were going to school. They had babies or were pregnant.
Yeah, teenage pregnancy was a big problem in our high school. So we had the bus with the car seats, and they'd pick up the parents, and then they had a daycare at the school. Our daughter didn't go there; she went to a separate daycare. But there was a bunch of parents that went to that school. If you were one of them, put that in the comments. We'd love to see. Put the picture of your
What's going
kids
on
or
with
something,
you?
right? Because our kid that we had at that time is now 28 years old
Yeah.
or 27 years old. We would love to see pictures of your kids, right? If you want to leave a comment or put a picture, that would be great.
So this was the moving into Alex's house. We are going to do our next video on our, like I said, the months that we were in school before we had Gorda, we had our first baby, and of course, the pet bus. How did we do it financially? How did we do school? What happened? And
Because remember, guys, this is our freshman year of high school still.
Yeah.
We still had 4 years to go before we graduated high school. So playing sports, our relationship, working through it, and people that we met along the way that also influenced us that weren't our family, right? That changed our way of thinking a little bit and stuff like that. We had a bunch of friends. We'll throw some shout outs in. But it's a great journey, and hopefully you can continue to follow us with this.
Yeah, so that'll be our next video, and hopefully we can also share, where we plan to go for our 28th anniversary. So we'll talk about that too.
That's gonna be a good one.
Thank you all so much for watching, and we will see you next time.
See you next time.